Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to offer my thoughts on Keir Starmer's speech earlier this week, before he tested positive, where he continued to set out what he wants to be the battle lines ahead of the next general election. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, the first thing to note is actually what Boris Johnson did about this. On Tuesday, a few days ago now, Boris Johnson held a press conference and then promptly said nothing in it. He told a few lies during the questions, but there was no announcement of anything. So why hold the press conference at all? Well, it was to make sure he captured all the headlines on the day that the leader of the opposition was making a keynote speech. The clear attempt to childishly steal the limelight was made even more obvious when the very next day, on the Wednesday, the government actually announced a new COVID policy. That people who test positive with a lateral flow in England don't need to follow it with a PCR test. Now, I could say many things about that, but I'll avoid getting distracted. But just to point out that having an announcement, a COVID-related announcement on the Wednesday that they hadn't made in the press conference really just a few hours before, made it all the more obvious that the press conference was a show grab. Another example of how much Boris Johnson and the Conservatives are actually worried about the progress that Keir Starmer is making, and they want to leave no stone unturned in avoiding letting the public hear him. And it does seem odd. In my mind, the ideal Labour leader combines pragmatism with a fiery oratory that engages people. Starmer may have the first, but is shockingly short of the second. Not that there was anyone who fit the bill on offer, but perhaps the contrast with the clownish Johnson has a calming impact on the public. I don't know. Whatever it is, the Conservatives are treating Starmer as a serious political opponent. Some polling was recently conducted for the so-called Red Wall seats. Those are the former Labour constituencies that the Conservatives took in the North and Midlands of England in 2019. The results spoke of the Conservatives losing 100 seats. Not enough to give Labour a majority, but enough to put Starmer, into number 10. But the task ahead is still incomplete because Labour need to present a positive message for change. It's all right, the negative message about how the Conservatives are making a mess of things. What is the positive message for change with the Labour government? And if we didn't already know, there was a big lesson to be learned from the failure of the Brexit campaign in 2016. Because in the aftermath of that, what the pollsters said when they analysed the results and they asked people, why did you vote this way and so on, one failure on the part of Remainers came through loud and clear from pollster after pollster. The Remain campaign spent all their time talking about the damage that leaving the EU would cause. And fair enough, that needed to be there. But what they didn't do was to highlight the benefits of remaining. So it was all doom and gloom. And the Leave campaigners, who were far better advised strategically, pushed their Project Fear slogan. All the naysaying was just Project Fear from the metropolitan elite, who simply don't understand ordinary folk like moneyed toffs such as Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson. The lesson was don't just point out how bad the other side's intentions are, point out how great yours are. Massive lesson. Starmer began his speech sounding like he understood that message. He reinforced that message. He started off by saying he was going to do something that most leaders of the opposition don't do. Does that win an election, I thought? He made a point of talking up the benefits of living in Britain. Now, people will roll their eyes at that. But he singled out the benefits of living in a country of laws with a liberal democracy. Now, for cynics like me, and perhaps lots of you, something like that cuts no ice. Life in Britain is crap. Working people are held back with stagnant wages. The cost of living is rising. The gap between rich and poor keeps widening. Way more under the Conservatives, but it has been a feature all my life. But vote for us because life is shit is perhaps not the slogan that will appeal to the people. We have to remember that part of Boris Johnson's appeal, indeed arguably his whole appeal, was painting this picture, this marvellous future for Britain and its people. It certainly wasn't combing his hair with a balloon. He thanked key workers and then after his introduction said that he wanted to present a government that might be worthy of us. Usual things, usual platitudes. He did then explain why the Conservatives are a shower of shit, how they abused our trust by not following the rules that they set for the rest of us, and also how they incompetently presided over a massive cost of living and cutbacks in public services. But then the speech took the interesting turn. So he set out what he called his contract with the people. Basically, a series of policy commitments. Presumably, this will be followed up at some point with something, a pamphlet or something that people will be encouraged to keep and hold him to for the following Parliament. A bit like Blair's pledge card, I guess. Now, this is what I'm interested in, because obviously any opposition intending to form a government needs to do lots of things. Because you cannot just spew out all your aims at the electorate, it's like throwing a bowl of alphabet spaghetti. Which are the key promises to make? You can't just have one day talking about one policy, another day another, and so on. What are the key, very small number of policies? And they're not necessarily the most important either. The key criterion is how likely are they to convert voters to your cause? If you're looking at, say, you've got 30 policy aims, right? You don't say, right, okay, I can only choose, say, about 5 to use in my campaign to really push. Right, what are the 5 most important? No, that's not how it works. Which are the 5 that are most appealing to the voters you need to turn towards your side? You can only have so many, and you have to choose carefully. And it sounds like Labour have decided which pledges they are going to go with. Hopefully, he's not going to get it mixed up with his leadership pledges, as one of them has already been scaled back, and that will be an instant source of angst, I feel. Oh, you've got some pledges, have you? Be a shame if something happened to them, like the last lot. But anyway, what were the pledges? The first was to run the government according to the Nolan principles. These are the standards that have existed for some time now, but are not being honoured by the current government. He said that his contract with the public would be based on 3 principles: security, prosperity, and respect. Now, specific policies included expanding community policing, visible policing in every community, how we aim to shift the emphasis on the NHS from emergency care to illness prevention. He also cited the worker protections that Angela Rayner had announced at the conference, which included decent sick pay. There's one thing the pandemic has highlighted. It is how it is not in our interest, economically or otherwise, not to have adequate sick pay. He promised an industrial strategy, including investment in climate change. He specifically cited the production of hydrogen to replace fossil fuels, for example. He promised 100,000 startup businesses and what he called hubs of excellence to support existing strengths in the area. So in a particular area, if you've got particular skills, making sure those skills can be utilised, that sort of thing. And certainly, as I discussed earlier this week, the current government doesn't have an economic strategy. He also talked about what he was describing as a constitutional settlement, basically stronger devolution. Firstly, then he crowbarred in the make Brexit work bit. I may have to discuss that more in another video at some point. So in terms of the basic pledges that it sounds like Labour want to fight the next election on, I think it can be summarised as, in terms of specific policies, not just, vague security, prosperity and so on. Specific policies: expansion of policing, worker protections, NHS expansion, capital investment in new technology, particularly green technology, stronger devolution, and fixing Brexit. So I make that 6. Not sure if that might not be a little too many. But that's also my summarising. They weren't presented as a checklist. In fact, from the speech, it actually sounded like Starmer just wants these 3 pledge headings into which he puts other pledges. I don't know how they're planning on presenting it. I'm a bit worried if that's snappy enough. In the speech earlier on, he tried to make some feeble joke. It was feeble. About, as a lawyer, you might be expecting all these clauses and sub-clauses to my pledges. Oh, it's not going to be like that at all. And then by the end of the speech, I was thinking, it sounds like it might be like that. I hope it's not like that. I'll tell you what I found interesting, though. If you compare them with the Blair pledges, because that's the last time we know it worked. The last form of this that actually got Labour into government. There were 5 pledges there. Now, I had to review them just to check that they weren't trying to mimic the same thing. Because that would be my worry, just going, well, the last time we won, we did these things, so let's promise the same things. Because the world's different now. People have different priorities. We need to know that Labour are accurately polling what people's priorities are right now. The pledges then, back in 1997, were on education, crime, the NHS, employment and taxation. Today, it's the education and taxation bit are missing from the showpiece pledges. Obviously, there are policies on those, but they are not choosing to make those their battlegrounds. I mean, Labour have been announcing a series of policies all year, or last year, and most people quite reasonably will go, well, I don't really know what they are. No, you won't, because there's a lot of them. You'd have to put effort into finding what they are. This is why it's important that you pick a few and really go with them. You really, ideally with slogans, and you really push those onto the public. You know, you can't explain what your 30 main policies are to the public. You can explain what your main 5 are. But it would appear that Labour have now set out their stall for the next election. So at the moment, the way we look at the lead that Labour have is really that's down to Conservative cock-ups. That is them imploding. Labour aren't doing anything at the moment to say to the public, this is what we're offering. Well, this hopefully is the start of that. So in a year's time, hopefully we can say, well, the normal member of the public will know what Labour is offering. You know, and as I said, they're going to have to come up with some way of presenting it. Slogans, easy, present them in an easy to digest format. But those appear to be the key messages that they want to push. Now, right now, as I say, you ask someone on the street what Labour want to do in government, they don't know. This year, that has to change. They need to be able to talk about at least a couple of the policies. If you like, try and push 5 or 6. People need to be able to tune in on at least a couple that appeal to them personally. Otherwise, the marketing has gone badly wrong. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.